Welcome to today's video on chess pieces, their values, how they move, and what are their special powers. This is what we are going to cover in this video. And before we get started, it is essential to understand how the pieces are set at the starting of the game. So you have already seen the notations which I explained in the previous video. In this video, we should learn how to place the pieces in their right squares. Now, let me quickly introduce the pieces. These tiny little ones, 8 pieces here, are called pawns. They are the fundamental blocks of your forces. Each pawn is worth about 1 point. They are typically placed at A2, B2, C2, D2, E2, F2, G2 and H2. This is from white's perspective. Similarly, black will place his pawns on A7, B7, C7, D7, E7, F7, G7 and H7. So that's about placing the pawns is concerned. Next, I introduce this piece. There are 2 pieces at the corners. You can see all the corners you can see. This is called rook. Each rook is worth 5 points. The white rooks are placed at A1 and H1. Black places his rooks on A8 and H8. So we learnt about pawn position and rook's position. Now let me introduce knights. There are 2 knights in your army, one on B1, another one on G1. Similarly, you can see for black, one on B8, another on G8. Then we have another piece called bishop, which is on C1 and F1. So again, you got 2 bishops, each worth 3 points. So the knights are also worth 3 points. The bishops are also worth 3 points. They are equal, almost equal in terms of its material value. Rooks on the other side are worth 5 points and pawns are worth 1 point each. Then I introduce you to this powerful piece, the queen, which sits on D1 for white and D8 for black. And at last I introduce you to the king. This is the most important piece on board. The main goal of the game is to capture the king, and white tries to capture black's king, black tries to capture white's king with the pieces. So that's all about your pieces. The king is on E1 and black king is on E8. One thing you should notice that they are symmetrical. You can see all the pieces are symmetrically placed. They are facing off each other. Right? Now that's all about your pieces and how to set them at the starting of the game. Next, we are going to learn about each of our pieces in detail. So when I say pieces, the one that is sitting here on the first rank and on the last rank are called pieces. Pawns are not pieces, pawns are just pawns. So when I say pieces, they're knights, bishops, rooks and queens and king. Yeah, these are pieces. And pawns are the fundamental blocks of your army. First, we will try to understand how they move and what are their special forces. Special movements that they possess. As you can see, we got 8 pawns in our army, and black also got 8 pawns on his side. The first thing to remember about pawns is they move either 1 square from its starting position or 2 squares from its starting position. This is the only time a pawn is allowed to move 2 steps forward. That's your choice whether you want to make your first move as one move or two moves, but after that, it's always one move at a time. For example, white can play e3, or he can also choose to play e4. Yep. Now, black can push e6 or e5. Not necessarily that he has to push this, he can also push this here or here. It's up to him. Just for the ease of understanding, I'm going to move this pawn 2 steps forward. We can move, for example, this pawn 1 step forward or 2 steps forward. For illustration purpose, let's say that it moves 1 step forward. Right? Now, you can also choose to move this 2 steps forward. As it moves, there is one feature that I want to introduce about pawns. I said that pawns can only move straight forward 1 step or 2 step, but there are conditions under which it can move sideways 1 square, either to the left or to the right. Like in this case, black has an option to capture this pawn. So capturing is one of the important features of the pawn. How they can do it? Whenever there is something ready to capture on this side or on this side diagonally, then it is allowed to capture. Black can choose to capture like this. Now, let's say white goes ahead and plays f4, moving 2 steps forward. Let's say, for example, black plays 1 step forward. Now, white wants to push this pawn 1 step forward. It cannot go 2 steps. You need to understand the pawns can only move 2 steps forward from its starting position, not after that. Now, this pawn, which is sitting here, cannot say that I will go 2 steps forward. It's not allowed. You can only move 1 step forward from its starting position. So keep that in mind. And it's white's turn now. White plays, let's say, e4 to e5. Right? Now, can black capture this pawn? If so, which pawn can capture? So take your time. Think about it. Which pawn can capture this e5 pawn? The answer is this f6 pawn can actually move 1 step diagonally and capture this pawn like this. Yeah. So once that's captured, now white can white recapture it like this? Is it allowed? Of course, yes. You can recapture it like this. Now, I introduce you to a new concept, one more special move from pawns. Let's say here white tries to push 2 steps forward, right? Now, if he had played this here, he could have captured it like this. But unfortunately, white tried to bypass and not give him an opportunity to capture back. So in this situation, there is a special rule called En Passant that black can choose to apply. I have made a special video on covering only the En Passant alone with lot of examples, which I will share it in the description below. You can check and watch that video as well for better understanding. But for now, if white tries to bypass without giving black an opportunity by moving 2 steps forward, black can choose to capture it as if the pawn was on c3, like this. So this is called En Passant. All right. So En Passant is one of the important concepts that apply only for pawns that you should keep in mind. Then let's say b pawn takes this back. And now black tries to push two steps here with this pawn. Now, what should white do here? Should he en passant here, or should he en passant here? How is it possible? Where can this pawn go while it does en passant? If white chooses to do en passant, will it land on d5 or on d6? Think about it. The answer is white will land on d6. That's how you can do en passant. But remember, just because you got a chance to do en passant doesn't mean that you should do it. You need to think whether it is required or not. Because I will introduce you to one more important feature of these pawns, the special powers of these pawns. That is, you can ignore this pawn and do not do en passant, because after you do it, he is going to capture it and nothing you achieved. But let's say you choose to move this pawn forward. Then let's say black tries something like this. You kept on pushing this pawn forward. Again, let's say he tries pushing this pawn here. Now, this pawn reaches the last rank. And here you have 4 options. You can either promote it into a queen, or you can promote it into a rook, or you can promote it into a bishop, or you can promote it into a knight. So you can choose to promote it as any piece that you would like to have on the board. So that's the special power of pawns. It can be promoted into a piece of your choice. It can be a queen, rook, knight, or a bishop. All right. So quickly, I will do a recap. The pawns move only 1 square or 2 squares from its starting position. That's the only time you have an option to choose whether you want to push it 1 step forward or 2 steps forward. After that, it can only move straight 1 square at a time. You can move sideways provided there is some piece or pawn to capture diagonally to the left or to the right 1 square, right? So that is about capture. Third, you have a special concept called en passant, where when you're denied of an opportunity to capture your opponent's pawn and he tries to jump 2 steps forward, denying you an opportunity, then you can take that pawn and place it to the square as if the piece was on the square that is denied. For example, in this case, if he was pushing it here, he could have very well taken it, but he denied and then he played d5. Now you can choose to do en passant. And en passant by itself has a lot of other special conditions, which I have listed in that video. Which I will also give a quick overview here. In the sense, you can only take it on the next move. You cannot go on playing some other move and say that, let's say black plays this, and you cannot come back and say that I will do en passant. That's not allowed. You can do en passant only on the very next move, not later. So that's one condition. You can check that video in the description. So the last point I wanted to bring in here is that when the pawn reaches the last rank, it can either be promoted into a queen, or into a knight, or into a bishop, or into a rook. So the choice is yours. You can promote it into any piece that you want. And that's all about pawns.